The rain hit the metal roof of Park Do-hyun's workshop like tiny hammers. Each drop made a sharp sound that echoed through the large space filled with broken ships and spare parts. Do-hyun wiped his hands on an old cloth and looked at the clock on the wall. It was almost closing time. His workshop sat at the edge of New Seoul Spaceport on the planet Hanbit 7. This was not the fancy part of the spaceport where rich people brought their expensive ships. This was where regular folks came when they needed help and did not have much money to spend. Do-hyun liked it that way. The workshop was messy, but organized in a way that made sense to him. Broken engine parts sat in neat piles on metal shelves. Tools hung from hooks on the walls. Half-finished projects filled every corner. His assistant Han Bo-young had gone home an hour ago, leaving Do-hyun alone with a stubborn fuel pump that refused to work properly. Do-hyun was 32 years old and had been fixing ships since he was 16. His father had taught him that every machine had a story to tell. You just had to listen carefully to understand what it needed. Some mechanics worked fast and charged high prices. Do-hyun worked slowly and charged fair prices. He never turned away a customer who really needed help. The sound of the rain changed. Now there was another sound mixed in. The soft hum of a hover engine getting closer. Do-hyun looked up from his work. Who would come out in weather like this so late in the day? A shape appeared through the rain and fog outside his workshop. It was not a normal ship or ground car. It looked like a platform, floating in the air with someone sitting on it. The platform moved smoothly through the open door of the workshop and stopped near Do-hyun's workbench. The person sitting on the platform was clearly not human. She had 4 arms instead of 2. Her skin looked like it was made of smooth, dark plates that fit together perfectly. Her eyes were large and had many small parts that moved independently. She belonged to a species that Do-hyun had seen a few times before but had never worked with directly. "Are you the mechanic, Park Do-hyun?" she asked. Her voice was soft but clear. She spoke human language well, though with an accent that made some words sound musical. "Yes, that's me," Do-hyun said. He set down his tools and walked over to her. "What can I help you with?" The alien woman looked tired. Her shoulders drooped and she held her lower 2 arms close to her body in a way that suggested pain or discomfort. The platform she sat on was clearly some kind of mobility device. Do-hyun could see that her lower body was not moving the way it should. "My name is Velara," she said. "I need help with a ship, but not the kind of help you usually give. I need a ship that someone like me can fly." Do-hyun nodded and pulled up a chair so he could sit at the same level as Velara. This was something his father had taught him. Always talk to customers as equals. "Tell me about the problem," he said. Velara pointed to her lower body with one of her upper arms. "I was hurt in an accident many years ago. I cannot move my legs or my lower arms the way I used to. My people, the Thekai, we fly ships using all 4 arms at once. The controls need constant movement from every limb. I cannot do this anymore." She paused and looked around the workshop. Her large eyes took in the organized chaos of parts and projects. "I have been to 7 different shipyards in 3 star systems. They all tell me the same thing. It cannot be done. Thekai ships cannot be modified for someone with my condition. They say I should accept that I will never fly again." Do-hyun frowned. He had worked on alien ships before. They were often designed very differently from human ships. But the idea that nothing could be done seemed wrong to him. Every problem had a solution. You just had to find it. "What do you need the ship for?" he asked. "I travel," Velara said simply. "I study different worlds and cultures. It is what I have always done. But now I am stuck on worlds that have good medical facilities. I cannot go to the places I want to explore because I cannot fly there myself." The rain was getting harder now. Do-hyun could barely hear anything except the water hitting the roof, but he was not thinking about the rain anymore. He was thinking about control systems and neural interfaces and all the different ways a ship could be flown. "Can you show me your current ship?" he asked. Velara's expression changed. For the first time since entering the workshop, she looked hopeful. "You will try to help me?" "I will do more than try," Do-Yun said. "I will figure out how to make it work. But I need to understand exactly what we are working with." The next morning, Velara returned with her ship. It was a small tech-high courier vessel, sleek and beautiful in the way that alien technology often was. But when Do-Hyun looked inside the cockpit, he understood the problem immediately. The control system was like nothing humans used. There were 4 separate control sticks that needed to be operated at the same time. Screens and buttons were placed where someone with 4 arms could reach them easily. The pilot's seat was designed for a body that could bend and twist in ways that human bodies could not. "This is definitely challenging," Do-Hyun admitted as he studied the layout. "But challenging is not the same as impossible." Han Bo-young arrived for work and found Do-Yun and Velara deep in discussion about flight control systems. He was surprised to see an alien customer, but Do-Yun had taught him that good mechanics helped everyone who needed help. "What do you think?" Do-Yun asked his assistant. "Neural interface combined with voice controls and eye tracking?" Han Bo-young looked at the ship and then at Velara. He was younger than Do-Hyun and sometimes worried about taking on projects that seemed too difficult. But he had learned to trust his boss's instincts. "It would be completely different from anything we have done before," he said slowly. "But I think you might be right. If we could make the ship respond to thoughts and small movements instead of big physical actions." Velara listened to their discussion with growing excitement. These humans were not telling her what could not be done. They were talking about what could be done instead. "How long would something like this take?" she asked. Do-Yun thought carefully. "A month, maybe more. It depends on how well the human technology works with tech-high systems. And it will not be cheap. This kind of custom work costs a lot." "Money is not the problem," Velara said. "Time is not the problem either. I have been grounded for 3 years. A few more weeks will not matter if it means I can fly again." As they talked, none of them knew that this conversation would change everything. Do-Hyun thought he was simply helping another customer with an interesting technical challenge. Velara thought she had finally found someone willing to help her solve a personal problem. Neither of them imagined that their meeting would eventually reshape the relationship between entire civilizations. But that was still in the future. For now there was only a mechanic, his assistant, and a customer who needed their help. It was exactly the kind of problem that Do-Hyun lived to solve. Do-Hyun spent the first week doing something he had never done before. He studied alien biology. Velara brought him data files about tech-high nervous systems and how their 4-armed coordination worked. She also shared technical manuals about her species' ship design philosophy. The more Do-Hyun learned, the more he understood why other mechanics had given up. Tech-high ships were not just designed for 4-armed pilots. They were designed for 4-armed pilots whose nervous systems worked very differently from human nervous systems. The Tech-high could think about 4 separate tasks at the same time without getting confused. Humans could barely manage 2 tasks at once. "The problem is not just the arms," Do-Hyun explained to Han Bo-young as they worked late one evening. "The problem is that their ships expect the pilot to be like a computer. Multiple processors running at the same time." Han Bo-young looked up from the control interface he was taking apart. "So we need to make the ship think for her instead of expecting her to think like the ship." "Exactly," Do-Yun said. He had been thinking about this problem for days and finally felt like he understood it. "We need to create a system that can take simple inputs and turn them into complex outputs." Velara visited the workshop every day. At first, she just watched them work and answered technical questions. But as the days passed, she began to help in small ways. Her knowledge of tech-high technology was much deeper than the manuals suggested. She seemed to understand things about her own species' engineering that even the official documentation did not cover. "You are not just a traveler, are you?" Do-hyun asked one afternoon, as Velara helped him trace a complex wiring diagram. Velara paused in her work. "What makes you say that?" "You know too much," Do-hyun said with a smile. "Most people who just use technology do not understand it this well. You talk about these systems like you helped design them." "I studied engineering before my accident," Velara said carefully. "I wanted to understand how things worked. It was a hobby that became more important after I could no longer do the things I used to do." That explanation made sense to Do-hyun, but something about the way Velara said it made him think there was more to the story. Still, everyone had secrets. As long as she was helping him solve the technical problems, her past was her own business. The breakthrough came in the second week. Do-hyun had been trying to create a system that would translate human-style controls into HFY-style commands. But every approach he tried was too slow or too complicated. Then Velara suggested something different. "What if you do not translate at all? What if you create entirely new commands that the ship can understand?" "You mean reprogram the ship's core systems?" Han Bo-young asked. "That sounds dangerous." "Not reprogram," Velara said. "Add a new layer, like putting a translator between me and the ship. The ship still thinks it is getting four-armed commands, but really it is getting them from a computer that understands what I want to do." Do-hyun stopped working and stared at her. "That is brilliant. We build an artificial four-armed pilot that sits between you and the ship's original systems." The idea was so simple that Do-hyun wondered why he had not thought of it before. Instead of changing everything about how the ship worked, they would create a middle layer that could speak both languages. Velara would tell the middle layer what she wanted to do using whatever methods worked best for her. The middle layer would then control the ship using its original four-armed system. Building the new system took another 2 weeks. Do-hyun had to combine human neural interface technology with HFY control systems. It was like trying to make 2 different languages work together perfectly. The neural interface was the hardest part. Human technology could read basic thoughts and intentions, but it had never been designed to work with HFY biology. Do-hyun had to modify the sensors and recalibrate the software to understand how Velara's nervous system worked. "This tickles," Velara said as Do-hyun tested the neural connections for the first time. She had thin wires attached to her forehead that could read her brain activity. "Try thinking about moving forward," Do-hyun said, watching the readings on his computer screen. The computer showed a clear pattern when Velara thought about forward movement. When she thought about turning left, the pattern changed. When she thought about stopping, it changed again. "It is working," Han Bo-young said excitedly. "The computer can tell what she wants to do, but reading thoughts was only half the solution. The system also had to control the ship smoothly and safely. Do-hyun spent days programming the artificial pilot that would translate Velara's intentions into ship movements. The artificial pilot was like a very smart assistant that never got tired or confused. When Velara thought about turning left, the artificial pilot would operate all 4 of the ship's control systems in exactly the right way to make a smooth left turn. When she wanted to accelerate, the artificial pilot would adjust engines, stabilizers, and navigation systems all at the same time. The beauty of this approach, Do-hyun explained to Kim Soo-young, the local administrator who had stopped by to see what was taking so long, is that we are not changing anything fundamental about the ship. We are just giving it a new kind of pilot. Kim Soo-young was not entirely sure why Do-hyun was spending so much time and resources on a single customer. The workshop usually worked on many smaller projects at the same time, but she had learned to trust Do-hyun's judgment about technical matters. "How much is she paying you for this?" Kim Soo-young asked. "Enough to cover costs and a reasonable profit," Do-hyun said. "She is not rich, but she is fair." That was true. Velara paid promptly and never complained about expenses, But she also did not seem to have unlimited money. She stayed in a modest hotel and ate simple meals. Everything about her suggested someone who was careful with money but not desperate. As the project neared completion, Do-hyun found himself looking forward to Velara's daily visits. She was easy to talk to and had interesting stories about the places she had traveled. She never acted like she was better than humans, even though her technology was clearly more advanced. She asked questions about human culture and seemed genuinely interested in the answers. "Why do humans help strangers?" she asked one day as they worked on calibrating the eye tracking system. "What do you mean?" Do-hyun asked. "You do not know me," Velara said. "I am not part of your family or your community. You gain nothing by helping me except money, and you could make more money working on easier projects. Yet you have spent weeks solving my problem. Why?" Do-hyun thought about that question for a long time before answering. "I suppose it is because the problem is interesting, and because you need help. Those seem like good enough reasons to me." "Most species do not think that way," Velara said, quietly. "Most species help their own kind and ignore everyone else. Humans seem different." "Maybe," Do-hyun said. "Or maybe we are just too young to know that we are supposed to ignore everyone else." Velara laughed at that. It was a musical sound that reminded Do-hyun of wind chimes. Perhaps being young is an advantage sometimes. By the end of the third week, everything was ready for the first test. The ship's cockpit now looked very different. Where there had once been 4 separate control stations, there was now a single pilot seat surrounded by screens and sensors. Velara would sit in the center, and the ship would respond to her thoughts, eye movements, and voice commands. "Are you ready to try it?" Do-hyun asked. Velara looked at the modified cockpit with an expression of hope and fear mixed together. She had been grounded for 3 years. The idea of flying again was wonderful and terrifying at the same time. "What if it does not work?" she asked. "Then we fix it until it does work," Do-hyun said simply. "That is what mechanics do." The first test would be just powering up the systems while the ship remained on the ground. If that worked, they would try actual flight the next day. Neither Do-hyun nor Velara knew that their next test would attract attention from much farther away than either of them could imagine. The morning of the test flight was clear and bright. Velara arrived at the workshop earlier than usual, and Do-hyun could see she had not slept well. Her large eyes moved nervously as she looked at her modified ship. "Remember," Do-hyun said as he helped her into the pilot seat. "Start with small thoughts. Do not try to do anything complicated until you feel comfortable with how the system responds." The neural interface headband felt familiar now after weeks of testing. Velara closed her eyes and took a deep breath as the sensors connected with her nervous system. The screens around her lit up with data showing that all systems were working properly. "Power up the engines," Do-hyun said from outside the ship. He and Han Bo-young were monitoring everything from a safe distance. Velara thought about the engines starting. The artificial pilot received her intention and smoothly brought the ship's 4 engine systems online. The sound was different from what she remembered from flying tech-high ships before her accident. This was quieter, more controlled. "Engines are stable," Han Bo-young reported, watching his instruments. "All systems show green." "Try lifting off," Do-hyun called. Velara thought about rising slowly into the air. The ship responded immediately, but gently. Instead of the jerky movements that often happened when learning new controls, the artificial pilot made everything smooth and natural. The ship rose 5 meters off the ground and hovered perfectly still. For the first time in 3 years, Velara was flying. Tears formed in her compound eyes as she felt the familiar sensation of being airborne. The ship responded to her smallest thoughts as if it could read her mind. When she wanted to move forward, it moved forward. When she wanted to turn, it turned exactly as much as she intended. "How does it feel?" Do-hyun asked through the communication system. "Like coming home," Velara whispered. For the next hour, they ran through basic flight tests. Velara practiced takeoffs and landings, turns and straight-line flight, speed changes and hover positions. Everything worked perfectly. The artificial pilot never hesitated or made mistakes. It translated her intentions into ship movements with a precision that amazed even Do-hyun. "I want to try something more challenging," Velara said after she had mastered the basic movements. "What do you have in mind?" Do-hyun asked. "There is a canyon about 50 kilometers from here. Narrow passages, sharp turns, obstacles that require quick reactions. It is the kind of flying that I used to love." Han Bo-young looked worried. "Maybe we should practice more basic flying first?" But Do-hyun understood. Velara had been grounded for 3 years. She did not want to just fly. She wanted to really fly, the way she had before her accident. "Go ahead," he said, "but stay in contact with us. If anything feels wrong, come back immediately." Velara smiled and accelerated toward the canyon. Do-hyun and Han Bo-young watched her ship disappear into the distance, then tracked her progress on their instruments. What happened next was beautiful to watch. Velara flew through the canyon like a dancer moving to music. The ship responded to her thoughts so quickly that it seemed to anticipate what she wanted to do. She dove between rock formations, spiraled up canyon walls, and threaded through passages barely wider than her ship. "Look at those readings," Han Bo-young said in amazement. "She is pulling maneuvers that would be difficult for a pilot with full mobility." Do-hyun nodded. The artificial pilot was not just compensating for Velara's limitations. It was enhancing her natural flying abilities. The combination of her experience and the system's precision created something better than either could achieve alone. When Velara returned to the workshop, her entire posture had changed. The sadness and resignation that Do-hyun had seen in her for weeks was gone. She looked like someone who had found a missing piece of herself. "You have given me back the sky," she told Do-hyun as she powered down the ship. "I do not know how to thank you." "You do not need to thank me," Do-hyun said. "Seeing you fly like that is thanks enough." They were interrupted by Han Bo-young calling from his instrument panel. "Do-hyun, you need to see this. I am getting readings of ships entering the system. Big ships." Do-hyun walked over to look at the scanner display. What he saw made no sense. There were 5 large vessels approaching Hanbit 7, and according to the scanner, they were HFY ships. But these were not ordinary civilian vessels. They were huge, heavily armed, and moving in military formation. "That is a battle fleet," Velara said quietly from behind them. She had moved her hover platform over to look at the scanner, and her voice had changed completely. The relaxed, friendly tone was gone, replaced by something much more serious. "A battle fleet?" Han Bo-young repeated. "Why would a HFY battle fleet come to Hanbit 7? We are just a small colony world. We do not have anything they would want." Velara did not answer immediately. She was studying the scanner readings with an intensity that made Do-hyun suspicious. She seemed to know more about those ships than she was saying. The communication system crackled to life. "Hanbit 7 Control. This is HFY Fleet Commander Kethvar. We request immediate permission to land at your primary spaceport. This is an urgent diplomatic matter." Kim Soo-young's voice came back over the radio, clearly confused and worried. "Fleet Commander, this is Administrator Kim Soo-young. Hanbit 7 is a small civilian colony. We do not have facilities for military vessels of your size. Can you tell us the nature of your diplomatic business?" "We are searching for someone," the fleet commander replied. "A member of our species who has been missing for several weeks. We have reason to believe she may have visited your system." Do-hyun looked at Velara, who had gone very still. "Velara, is there something you need to tell us?" Before she could answer, another voice came over the radio. This voice was also HFY, but it sounded older and more formal than the fleet commander. "People of Hanbit 7, I apologize for this sudden arrival. I am High Counselor Zethmar of the HFY Diplomatic Corps." We are looking for Empress Velara Tekneth, ruler of the Tek-High Stellar Dominion. Her ship was damaged in an asteroid field 6 weeks ago, and she has been missing since then. Any information about her whereabouts would be greatly appreciated. The workshop became very quiet. Do-hyun and Han Bo-young both turned to stare at Velara, who was no longer looking at the scanner. Instead, she was looking down at her hands with an expression of someone who had been caught in a lie. "Empress?" Do-hyun said slowly. Velara sighed, deeply. When she looked up, her whole manner had changed. The simple traveler who had been visiting his workshop for weeks was gone. In her place sat someone who clearly carried the weight of enormous responsibility. "Yes," she said simply. I'm Empress Velara Tekneth. I rule the Tek-High Stellar Dominion, which includes over 200 star systems and nearly 1 trillion citizens." Han Bo-young made a choking sound. "1 trillion citizens? You rule 1 trillion people?" "I do," Velara said, "and right now they are probably very worried about me. I have been missing for 6 weeks without any communication. My security forces have been searching every system they think I might have visited." Do-hyun sat down heavily in his chair. He tried to process what he had just learned. For weeks he had been casually chatting with one of the most powerful beings in the galaxy. They had shared coffee and worked on technical problems together like old friends. She had paid him with what he thought was her personal savings, but was probably the equivalent of pocket change for someone who ruled an interstellar empire. "Why did you not tell us who you were?" he asked. Velara's expression softened. "Because I wanted you to help me for the right reasons. Every mechanic who has turned me away has done so because they thought the job was impossible. But if they had known who I was, they would have tried anyway, just because I am the Empress. They would have failed, but they would have wasted months trying, because they were afraid to disappoint me." She gestured toward her modified ship. "You helped me because you saw a problem that needed solving. You worked on it because it was interesting and challenging. You succeeded because you approached it with honesty and creativity. If you had known who I was from the beginning, would you have worked the same way?" Do-hyun thought about that question. He realized that she was probably right. If he had known he was working for an empress, he would have been nervous and careful. He might have second-guessed himself or tried to impress her instead of just solving the problem in the most practical way. "You are right," he admitted. "I probably would have made it more complicated than it needed to be." The radio crackled again. "Handbit 7 control. Our sensors show a small Tek-High vessel at coordinates matching the civilian spaceport. Please confirm if this vessel belongs to the person we are seeking." Kim Soo-young's voice was tight with stress. "Fleet Commander, I need to check with our local facilities. Can you give us a few minutes?" "Of course," the fleet commander replied. "But please understand that this is a matter of extreme urgency." Velara looked at Do-hyun and Han Bo-young. "I need to contact my fleet and let them know I am safe. But before I do that, I want you to know that meeting you has changed something important for me. You have shown me something that I thought was lost forever." "What is that?" Do-hyun asked. "The idea that people can be judged by their actions rather than their status," Velara said. "You helped me not because I was an empress, but because I was someone who needed help." The 5 Tek-High warships landed at New Seoul Spaceport with a precision that made the ground shake. Each ship was larger than any building in the small colony town. Their dark hulls gleamed with decorative patterns that marked them as vessels of the Imperial Fleet. Do-hyun watched from his workshop as hundreds of Tek-High soldiers poured out of the ships. They moved in perfect formation, their armor reflecting the afternoon sun. Even from a distance, he could see that these were not ordinary soldiers. Their equipment and bearing marked them as elite guards. "I have never seen so many aliens in one place," Han Bo-young whispered. He was pressed against the workshop window, staring at the organized chaos of the military landing. Velara sat in her hover platform, no longer wearing the simple traveler's clothes she had worn for weeks. Instead, she had put on what looked like ceremonial garments that seemed to be made of fabric that shifted colors in the light. Intricate patterns covered her arms and head, patterns that somehow made her look larger and more imposing than before. "They are my personal guard," she explained as she watched her soldiers establish a security perimeter. "The Crimson Wing Battalion. They have been searching for me across 7 star systems." A group of Thekai in elaborate armor approached the workshop. At their head walked a figure who was clearly their commander. He was larger than the other soldiers and moved with the confidence of someone used to being obeyed without question. "That is Fleet Commander Kethvar," Velara said. "He has been in charge of my security for 20 years. He is probably very angry with me right now." Kethvar stopped outside the workshop and spoke in a voice that carried easily across the distance. "Empress Velara, by your leave, I would like to secure this area and escort you to safety." "You may approach, Kethvar," Velara replied, her voice taking on a formal tone that Do-hyun had never heard from her before. "But these humans are my friends and allies. They are under my personal protection." The fleet commander entered the workshop, followed by 6 guards. Up close, Do-hyun could see that Thekai military equipment was far more advanced than anything humans possessed. Their armor seemed to be alive, shifting and adjusting to their movements. Their weapons hummed with energy that made the air feel thick. Kethvar approached Velara and performed what was clearly a formal bow. When he spoke, his voice mixed relief with barely controlled frustration. "Empress, you have been missing for 6 weeks. The High Council feared you were dead. The entire Imperial fleet has been searching for you. Why did you not contact us?" Velara gestured toward her modified ship. "Because I was solving a problem that was more important than protocol." "Commander Kethvar, I would like you to meet Park Do-hyun and Han Bo-young, the humans who have accomplished something that our best engineers said was impossible." Kethvar looked at the 2 humans with obvious suspicion. "Empress, with respect, we need to get you to a secure location immediately. Whatever business you have been conducting here can be handled through proper diplomatic channels." "This business cannot be handled through diplomatic channels," Velara said firmly. "These humans have demonstrated capabilities that change everything we thought we knew about this species." "Look at my ship, Commander. Really look at it." Kethvar turned his attention to the modified vessel for the first time. Do-hyun could see the exact moment when the fleet commander realized what he was seeing. The alien's posture shifted from impatience to amazement. "Empress, you flew here in that ship?" "I did, and not just here. I flew through Copper Canyon at full speed, performing maneuvers that I have not been able to do since my accident. These humans created a control system that allows me to fly better than I could even before I was injured." The workshop had filled with more Thekai now. Some were clearly scientists or engineers rather than soldiers. They examined the modified ship with intense interest, speaking rapidly to each other in their own language. One of them approached Velara and spoke in human language. "Empress, this control system, it uses neural interfaces we have never seen before. The artificial intelligence that mediates between pilot and ship is far more sophisticated than anything in our databases. Because it is human technology," Velara said, "combined with our technology in ways that neither species had thought possible." Do-hyun found himself in the strange position of explaining his work to some of the most advanced engineers in the galaxy. They asked detailed questions about neural interface design and artificial intelligence programming. Some of their questions were so advanced that he had trouble understanding what they were asking. "The interesting thing," one of the Thekai engineers said, "is that this approach is completely different from how we would have tried to solve the problem. We would have attempted to modify the pilot to work with the ship. You modified the ship to work with the pilot." "That is the human way," Han Bo-young said, speaking up for the first time since the aliens had arrived. "We changed the tools instead of changing the person." Meanwhile, Kim Soo-young had arrived with what looked like every official in the colonial government. She appeared overwhelmed by suddenly having to manage what was clearly a major diplomatic event in her small backwater settlement. "Administrator Kim," Velara said when she saw the group of nervous humans, "I apologize for the disruption to your colony. I should have revealed my identity sooner, but I wanted to understand what kind of people you humans really are before making any official contact." "And what kind of people are we?" Kim Soo-young asked. Her voice shook slightly, but she was trying to maintain her dignity in an impossible situation. "The kind who help strangers without asking for rewards," Velara said. "The kind who see problems as opportunities rather than obstacles. The kind who judge people by their character rather than their appearance or status." She gestured toward Do-hyun. "This human spent a month solving my problem without knowing who I was. He worked with dedication and creativity, not because I was an empress, but because I was someone who needed help. That kind of thinking is rare in the galaxy." Captain Lee Jin-woo, who managed spaceport security, had been watching the proceedings with growing confusion. "Your Majesty, with respect, I do not understand why this is such a big deal. Mr. Park has always been helpful to any customer who needs assistance. That is just the kind of person he is." "Exactly," Velara said. "That is exactly my point. You humans treat helpful behavior as normal. Most species treat it as exceptional. Most species help only their own kind and ignore everyone else. Some species actively harm anyone who is different from them." Kethvar looked troubled. "Empress, are you suggesting that we should establish formal relations with humanity based on this single interaction?" "I am suggesting that this single interaction reveals something important about human nature," Velara replied. "But it is not the only evidence. During my time here, I have observed how this colony operates, how they settle disputes, how they share resources, how they treat visitors from other worlds. Everything I have seen confirms what I learned from working with Mr. Park." She turned her hover platform to face all the humans and Thek-hai in the workshop. "I believe that humanity represents something new in the galaxy. A species that has advanced technology but has not lost the ability to cooperate and innovate. Most species become rigid and hierarchical as they develop. Humans seem to remain flexible and creative." High Counselor Zethmar, the elderly diplomat, Do-hyun had heard on the radio, entered the workshop at that moment. He moved slowly but with great dignity, and everyone stepped aside to let him approach the Empress. "Your Majesty," he said formally, "the High Council is greatly relieved to find you safe. However, I must point out that your extended absence has created significant political complications. There are factions that question whether you are still capable of ruling effectively." Velara's expression hardened. "Those factions have been questioning my capability since my accident. They believe that physical disability equals mental weakness. Perhaps it is time to prove them wrong in a very public way." "What do you have in mind?" Zethmar asked cautiously. "I propose that we invite humanity to become the first junior partner in the Thek-hai Stellar Dominion," Velara said. "A formal alliance based on mutual respect and shared innovation." The workshop became completely silent. Do-hyun could hear his own heartbeat. What Velara was suggesting was so far beyond anything he had imagined that he could barely process it. "Your Majesty," Zethmar said slowly, "humanity is a very young species. They have barely expanded beyond their home system. They have no experience with galactic politics or interstellar warfare. Most of the High Council would consider such an alliance premature at best." "Most of the High Council think like every other old species in the galaxy," Velara replied. "They believe that age equals wisdom and power equals worth. But look at what these humans accomplished in 4 weeks. They solved a problem that our greatest engineers said was impossible. They did it not with superior technology, but with superior thinking." She looked directly at Do-hyun. "What you have built here is not just a ship modification. It is proof that different species can work together to achieve things that neither could achieve alone. That is exactly what the galaxy needs, if we are going to solve the problems that are coming." The emergency meeting took place in the largest building on Hanbit 7, which was the Colonial Administration Center. It was not designed for diplomatic meetings between species, but it was the only space big enough to hold everyone who needed to be involved. Velara sat at one end of the main conference table, surrounded by her advisors and military commanders. The humans sat at the other end, looking overwhelmed, but determined. Kim Soo-young had contacted the Earth government, and Ambassador Choi Mink-young was participating through video link from the human diplomatic station 3 systems away. "Let me make sure I understand the situation," Ambassador Choi said, her voice carrying clearly through the communication system. "Empress Velara is proposing a formal military and economic alliance between the HFY Stellar Dominion and humanity, based primarily on observations made during a month-long stay on one of our frontier colonies." "That is correct," Velara replied, though I would phrase it differently. "I am proposing an alliance based on demonstrated compatibility of values and approaches to problem-solving." High Counselor Zethmar looked uncomfortable with the entire discussion. "Ambassador Choi, with respect to your species, the Empress has been through a traumatic experience. Her judgment may not be entirely reliable at this time." Velara's compound eyes flashed with anger. "Counselor, my judgment is perfectly clear, clearer, perhaps, than it has been in years. These humans have shown me something that I thought no longer existed in the galaxy, genuine innovation driven by compassion rather than by competition or fear." "Your Majesty," Fleet Commander Kethvar interjected, "even if we accept that humans have admirable qualities, there are practical concerns. They have no interstellar military. Their technology is centuries behind ours. What could they contribute to an alliance with the Dominion?" Do-hyun had been listening to the discussion with growing frustration. Finally, he spoke up. "Commander, you are thinking about this wrong. You are asking what we can do with your technology. But the real question is what we can do with our thinking." "Explain," Kethvar said. "Your engineers told Empress Velara that her problem could not be solved," Do-hyun continued. "They were wrong, but not because they lacked skill or knowledge. They were wrong because they approached the problem with assumptions that limited their solutions. They tried to make the pilot fit the ship instead of making the ship fit the pilot." Han Bo-young nodded enthusiastically. "That is how humans approach most problems. We change the situation instead of accepting it as unchangeable." One of the tech-high engineers who had been examining the modified ship looked up from his data pad. "The human approach to our flight control problem was unlike anything in our technical literature. They created a solution that none of our simulation models had predicted." "Because your simulation models were based on tech-high thinking," Velara said. "You cannot simulate solutions that you cannot imagine. That is why diversity of thought is so valuable." Ambassador Choi had been consulting with advisors off-screen. When she turned back to the camera, her expression was serious. "Your Majesty, I have been authorized to tell you that humanity is interested in establishing formal diplomatic relations. However, we would need to proceed carefully. We have no experience with galactic politics, which is exactly why you might succeed where others have failed," Velara replied. "You have not yet learned that some problems are supposed to be impossible to solve." The discussion was interrupted by an urgent alert from the tech-high fleet. Kethvar received the message and his expression became grim. "Empress, the Hegemony Scout Fleet has changed course. They are now heading directly for this system. Estimated arrival time is 18 hours. Silence filled the room. Do-hyun did not fully understand who the Hegemony was, but the reaction of the tech-high made it clear that this was very bad news. "Who is the Hegemony?" Kim Soo-young asked. High Counselor Zethmar answered grimly. "A collection of species that believe the galaxy should be unified under their control. They conquer worlds, enslave populations, and eliminate any culture that does not conform to their standards. They have been expanding for 300 years. And they are very good at preventing alliances that might threaten them," Velara added. If they discover that the Dominion is establishing relations with a new species, they will act quickly to disrupt those relations. What kind of action? Ambassador Choi asked. They might attack this colony to prevent any agreement from being finalized, Cathvar said bluntly. Or they might demand that we turn over all humans in this system as a demonstration of continued neutrality. The room became very quiet. Do-hyun felt a chill as he realized that his simple act of helping a customer had somehow put his entire world in danger. There has to be another option, he said. There is, Velara replied. We can formalize our alliance immediately and present the hegemony with an accomplished fact. Once humanity is officially under Dominion protection, attacking this system would be an act of war against both our species. But that would mean committing humanity to a conflict we know nothing about, Ambassador Choi protested. You are already committed, Velara said simply. The moment I landed here and began working with your people, you became involved. The hegemony does not distinguish between willing and unwilling participants. They will see any cooperation with the Dominion as a threat. Captain Lee Jinwoo had been following the discussion with growing alarm. Are you saying that we are going to be attacked just because we helped you fix your ship? I am saying that you are going to be attacked because you demonstrated the kind of thinking that the hegemony fears most, Velara replied. They maintain control by convincing everyone that resistance is futile. Species that find new solutions to old problems threaten that control. Do-hyun stood up from his chair. This is insane. All I did was solve an engineering problem. How does that threaten an entire empire? Because you solved it in a way that proved cooperation works better than domination, Velara said. You took technology from two different species and made them work together to achieve something neither could do alone. That is exactly the opposite of what the hegemony teaches. High Counselor Zethmar looked at his datapad. Empress, even if we wanted to proceed with an immediate alliance, the legal and political complications would be enormous. The High Council would need to vote on any major treaty. That process takes weeks. Then we skip the normal process, Velara said. I'm invoking the Emergency Powers Clause of the Imperial Charter. In situations where the security of the Dominion is immediately threatened, the ruling Empress can establish temporary alliances without council approval. Your Majesty, Zethmar protested, that clause has not been used in over 2 centuries. The political consequences could be severe. The political consequences of allowing the hegemony to eliminate a potential ally would be far worse, Velara replied firmly. I have made my decision. She turned to face Ambassador Choi on the screen. Ambassador, I am offering humanity immediate entry into the Thek-Hai Stellar Dominion as a junior partner. You would have full protection under Dominion law and access to our technology and trade networks. In return, you would contribute your innovations and perspectives to our joint defense efforts. I need to consult with my government, Ambassador Choi said. You have 6 hours, Velara replied. That is how long it will take me to prepare the necessary documents and ceremonies. After that, the hegemony fleet will be too close to risk any delay. As the various groups broke up to consult with their respective governments and advisors, Do-hyun found himself standing alone with Velara near the window of the conference room. You really think this will work? He asked. I think it is our best chance, Velara replied, but I also think it is the right thing to do regardless of whether it works. Your species has something that the galaxy needs. It would be a tragedy to lose that, because we were too cautious to act. What if humanity says no? Velara was quiet for a long moment. Then I will order my fleet to defend this system anyway, because that is what friends do for each other. Do-hyun looked out the window at the Thek-Hai warships sitting on the landing field. In a few hours, those ships might be fighting to protect his world against an enemy he had never heard of until today. All because he had decided to help someone who needed assistance. You know what the strangest part of all this is? He said. What? A month ago, my biggest worry was whether I had enough spare parts to fix Mrs. Park's cargo hauler. Now I am apparently helping to decide the future of human civilization. Velora made the musical sound that served as Thekai laughter. That is exactly why I have faith in your species. You can go from fixing cargo haulers to reshaping galactic politics without losing sight of what really matters: helping people who need help. Outside, the sun was setting over Hanbet 7. By morning, everything would be different. Whether it would be better or worse remained to be seen, but there was no going back now. The choice had been made, and all that remained was to see what consequences would follow. The ceremony took place at dawn in Do Yun's workshop. It was not the most impressive location for signing the first treaty between humanity and an alien empire, but Velara had insisted. "This is where the alliance really began," she said. "It should be where it becomes official." The workshop had been hastily cleaned and rearranged to accommodate the ceremony. Velara's modified ship sat in the center of the space, serving as a symbol of what cooperation between species could achieve. Thek-high banners hung alongside human flags, creating a mixture of colors and symbols that had never been seen before. Ambassador Choi had arrived on the fastest ship the human government could send. She looked tired from the rushed journey, but determined to represent her species properly. Earth had agreed to the alliance after heated discussions that lasted all night. The choice had come down to a simple question: was it better to face the unknown with allies or alone? The government was not happy about the time pressure, Ambassador Choi told Do-hyun as they waited for the ceremony to begin. But they recognized that we did not really have a choice. If the hegemony is as dangerous as the Thek-high say, we will need all the help we can get. Do-hyun nodded, though he still felt overwhelmed by how quickly everything was moving. 3. Days ago, he had been a simple mechanic. Now he was apparently a key figure in humanity's first interstellar alliance. The ceremony itself was a mixture of human and Thek-high traditions that somehow worked together despite being completely different. Velara spoke formal words in her own language, while Ambassador Choi responded in carefully practiced Thek-high phrases. Documents were signed with both human and alien symbols. But the most important moment came when Velara addressed everyone, present in plain language that needed no translation. "Today we are creating something new in the galaxy," she said. "Not a relationship between conqueror and conquered or between superior and inferior. We are creating a partnership between equals, who have different strengths." She gestured toward Do-hyun. 4 weeks ago, this human could have turned me away like 7 other mechanics did. Instead, he saw a problem that needed solving and solved it with creativity and determination. That willingness to help others and find new solutions is exactly what the galaxy needs right now. High Counselor Zethmar stepped forward with the official documents. The treaty was written on a material that shimmered like metal but felt like paper. The words were in both human and Thek-high languages side by side. "The Hanbit Accords," Zethmar announced, "establishing formal alliance between the Thek-high Stellar Dominion and the Human Federation. Signed this day in the workshop of Park Do-yun on the world of Hanbit 7. As Ambassador Choi and Velara signed the documents, alarms began sounding from the Thek-high ships outside. Fleet Commander Kethvar listened to reports from his fleet and turned to address the ceremony. "The Hegemony Scout Fleet has arrived at the edge of the system," he announced. "They are demanding to speak with whoever is in charge here." "Perfect timing," Velara said with satisfaction. "Now we can present them with the completed alliance instead of negotiations they might try to disrupt." The communication came through on the main screen that had been set up for the ceremony. The hegemony commander was a member of a species that Do-hyun had never seen before. The alien looked like a cross between a lizard and a machine, with metallic implants covering much of his visible body. "I am War Commander Sektar of the Hegemony Enforcement Fleet," the alien said in mechanical-sounding human language. "We have," detected unauthorized contact between Dominion forces and the primitive species inhabiting this system. Such contact violates the Neutral Species Protection Accords. Valara moved her hover platform in front of the screen. War Commander, I am Empress Valara Thekneth. There is no violation of any accords. As of 1 hour ago, humanity is no longer a neutral species. They are formal allies of the Thek-Hai Stellar Dominion. The hegemony commander's expression did not change, but something in his posture suggested surprise. That is impossible. The integration of new species requires extensive evaluation and preparation. It cannot be accomplished in a matter of weeks. It can when the species in question demonstrates exceptional value, Valara replied. Humanity has proven their worth through innovation and cooperative problem-solving. They are now under full Dominion protection. We will need to verify this claim, Sektar said. Prepare to submit to inspection of your Alliance documents and facilities. You have no authority to inspect Dominion facilities, Fleet Commander Kethvar interjected, his voice carrying barely controlled anger. Your presence in this system is already a violation of territorial boundaries. The tension in the room was so thick that Do-Yun could feel it. These aliens were talking about inspections and territorial violations, but everyone knew they were really discussing whether there would be a war. Then something unexpected happened. Han Bo-Young, who had been quietly watching the proceedings, stepped forward and spoke directly to the screen. War Commander, sir, can I ask you a question? Everyone turned to stare at the young mechanic. Ambassador Choi looked horrified that a civilian was addressing the alien military commander directly. You may speak, primitive, Sektar said with obvious contempt. What makes you think we are primitive? Han Bo-Young asked politely. I mean, what specific evidence do you have? Sektar seemed taken aback by the question. Your species has barely achieved interstellar travel. Your technology is centuries behind galactic standards. Your society lacks the discipline and organization necessary for advanced civilization. But we solved a problem that Thek-Hai engineers said was impossible, Han Bo-Young continued in the same polite tone. We created new technology by combining different approaches in ways that no one had tried before. Does that not suggest that maybe your evaluation criteria are incomplete? Do-Hyun suddenly understood what his assistant was doing. Han Bo-Young was not just asking random questions. He was demonstrating the exact kind of thinking that had impressed Valara in the first place. The problem we solved was not particularly complex, Han Bo-Young went on. It just required looking at the situation differently. Maybe that is what your species calls primitive, but we call it practical. Sektar's mechanical voice carried a note of irritation. Clever words do not change fundamental realities. Your species lacks the military strength to be useful allies and the advanced knowledge to contribute meaningful innovations. Actually, Do-Hyun said, stepping up beside Han Bo-Young, I think you are wrong about both of those things. We may not have big fleets, but we have something more valuable. We have the ability to find solutions that others miss. He gestured toward Valara's ship. That ship represents a completely new approach to neural mechanical interfaces. The technology could be applied to everything from manufacturing to medical treatment. How much is that worth to an empire? And as for military strength, Ambassador Choi added, apparently deciding to support the impromptu demonstration, human military doctrine has always emphasized flexibility and adaptation over raw power. We specialize in finding weaknesses that others do not see. Valara watched this exchange with obvious satisfaction. Her human allies were proving her point better than any formal presentation could have. War Commander Sektar was silent for several seconds. When he spoke again, his tone had changed slightly. Your arguments are interesting. However, the Hegemony Council will need to evaluate this new alliance thoroughly. We will be establishing monitoring stations in nearby systems. You are welcome to monitor from outside Dominion territory, Velara replied firmly. Any attempt to establish unauthorized facilities within our space will be considered an act of aggression. After the hegemony fleet departed, the real work began. The alliance was official, but making it function would require enormous effort from both species. Velara announced the creation of the Human Thechai Engineering Cooperative with Do-Yun as its first director. I want you to expand what you have started here, she told him as they stood in his workshop for what might be the last time as simply a repair facility. Bring together engineers and scientists from both species. Find new solutions to old problems. Show the galaxy what cooperation can accomplish. The workshop would remain, but it would grow. Plans were already being made for additional buildings, expanded facilities, and research laboratories. Scientists from Earth were preparing to travel to Hanbit 7, while Thechai engineers were eager to learn human problem-solving techniques. What about you? Do-Hyun asked Velara. Will you stay involved with the project? I will visit regularly, she said. I want to keep learning from you humans. You have changed my perspective on what is possible when different viewpoints work together. She looked around the workshop one more time, taking in the organized chaos that had somehow produced a revolution in interstellar relations. You know, when I first came here, I just wanted to fly again. I never imagined that helping me would help both our species find a new way forward. That is the thing about helping people, Do-Yun said. You never know where it might lead. 6 months later, the workshop had become the headquarters of a research facility that hosted scientists from 12 different species. The modified ship that had started everything was on display in the main lobby,